Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you. I want to begin, Admiral, with this recent disturbing Defense One article, and I'd like to submit it for the record. Mr. Chairman, Navy on path to violate 31 amphib ship requirement in 2024. So,
submit it without objection.
Thank you. So, as you probably know, a number of us, myself, the chairman, worked hard on this 31 ship floor, amphib ship floor. And this is not a suggestion, it's a law, right? It's a law. So my view is you don't even have the authority to do this. And I've raised this with the CNO and others, but this is something that the Navy, the Marine Corps worked on, and out of the gate, you guys said, maybe we'll just blow off those senators and congressmen. Again, not a suggestion. I'm actually really pissed about this. So how do you answer this? Like, my view is there is no answer. You have a law. We passed it. It went through. The President of the United States signed it. By the way, in the committee, it was unanimous. This committee was in the base bill. So it wasn't controversial. And the Navy comes out and says, we'll just blow off those silly U.S. senators. So what are we doing here, Admiral? And how can you rectify this? It's a big issue.
It is a big issue.
I'm not pleased about it, and no U.S. member of Congress should be pleased about it. You guys don't have that authority to do what you just did in the President's budget. That's my view. Okay.
Yes, sir. In terms of the impact, in terms of getting below 31 amphibs, is with our LSDs.
Right, but why don't you address the threshold issue, which is we told you not to go below it.
The cost in terms of we
told you in a law signed by the President not to go below the floor. So what's your answer to that?
My answer to that,
costs or anything, we balance the costs.
Yes, sir. But the answer to that, sir, is having 31 ships, of which 3 of them may be tied to a pier for the next 5 years, is not really 31. We have an aging platform that came into the service about the same time I did back in the mid-'80s.
We need a serious discussion on this issue, because my view, the Navy should be pretty darn worried about a headline saying Navy on path to violate 31 amphib ship requirement in 2024. And if you're saying the 31 ships, 3 of which are just going to be sitting there in maintenance for 5 more years, that's a problem. I think what you guys needed to do before you issued the budget is come to this committee, given how important this was to a number of, given, by the way, how important this was to the U.S. Marine Corps, and not surprise us with, in my view, a violation of a law that we worked really hard on last year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's we will certainly take that as if we're going to be doing anything that looks like it's not going to make that. We will come and talk to you in advance. So that's a great request on your part. Happy to do that.
Okay, very, very important. General, I want to turn to force design. I have written an article. It was a while ago in Defense News, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to submit this for the record. And it essentially lauds the Commandant for really focusing on a bold, innovative plan. However, there are a number of issues that are out there that are being debated within the Marine Corps. This is the biggest restructuring of the Corps, at least in decades, maybe in 100 years. And I've let the Commandant know this. I think it's important we have hearings on this, that we stress test it, that the light of congressional hearings, people who are for force design, people who have issues with force design, that we do that either on this committee, Mr. Chairman, as you and I have talked about, or the Readiness Subcommittee or the full committee. But let me ask a really basic question that's one of the criticisms. And again, recognizing what the Marine Corps is trying to do, as you probably know, I'm a little biased in terms of the services, and the Marine Corps is one that I have a lot of respect for obvious reasons. But there is this issue of as I wrote in this op-ed, managing the gap between divestment of current combat capability and future combat capability development entails significant risk. The Commandant acknowledged that in a hearing last year. And some critics have stated that the Marine Corps is starting to be designed for a niche force with a niche, important combat mission, China, Taiwan, but leaving out the statutory mandates of a combined arms, 3-division. Again, that's the law, right? The 1947 Act. So the Marine Corps doesn't have a choice on that either. And the very significant cuts that have already occurred with regard to infantry, 100% of armor, bridging, mine clearing capabilities, combat engineer capabilities, very significant cannon artillery, MPs are gone. I mean, there's a whole host of things from my perspective that the MAGTF seems to be something that has been the most important issue in the Marine Corps for decades. We don't rely on anyone for logistics, for clearing, for bridging, for air, for ARTI. And all of a sudden, when I'm pressing on this, people are talking about, well, we're going to do an MOU with the Army for bridging. Really? We're going to do an MOU with the Army for road clearing. Really? That, to me, seems to go fundamentally against the whole idea of the MAGTF and self-sustainment. And I guess the bottom line, big question is that force and readiness capability, that is the kick in the door capability anywhere in the world, which is the hallmark of the Marine Corps. Some of the critics are saying that force design is dramatically undermining this, particularly when the divestments have not been made up with future combat capabilities. That's a lot to throw at you, General. I think this deserves its own hearing, but do you care to respond to any of that?
Sir, that is a huge, and sir, it does deserve. I would offer myself and my staff to come back with you and sit down.
Well, I'm talking about a hearing, like
yes, sir,
with critics and proponents.
And we would do that as well. But sir, I can tell you that having been in this job now for almost 18 months, I'm a Fleet Marine, sir. I came from the commanding 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. We're on the right track, and we have not. The MAGTF, sir, is as strong, if not stronger, than it ever has been. The issue, sir, let me just put it this way. HAL 3 MEF, the stand-in force, it's been that way for decades, right? And all the MEFs are different. They always have been. Different sizes, different capabilities, but they're MAGTFs. We simply did not equip 3 MEF with the tools to deal with the NDS-directed pacing threat. General Dunford acknowledged it. General Neller acknowledged it. The Marine Corps was not organized, trained, and equipped to deal with the Communist Chinese Party. So we are doing that. But, sir, I think...
And I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Like I said, I've lauded General Berger for he's getting on it more than anyone else. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have flaws. And that doesn't mean that some of the criticisms or wargaming or this big issue, and the General acknowledged it, I mean, we have divested a lot. I mean, I have one number here, 21% of infantry, 100% of armor, bridging, and mine clearing capability, 100% of MPs, 67% of cannon artillery, a significant amount of critical fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft. My numbers are 35% of all F-35s. I mean, now maybe those numbers are wrong, and this is why we need a hearing, but that's a lot of divestment.
Sir, and sir, all I would say to some of the, and sir, I don't like to get into the, because a lot of these are respected individuals, but they're entitled to their own opinions, they're not entitled to their own facts. We have not diminished a single program of record. I'm a V-22 guy. We are now at, and I'm going to stay in classification level, but we're going to stop at 16 VMMs. The Commandant added 2 more, right? He was going to go to 14, he added 2 more. We're going to be at 16 of 10 plane. If I maintained 16 squadrons of 12 planes, I would be coming to you with a bill for an additional 34 V-22s. Our program is 360. We bought 360. Our program of record for JSF is 420. 353 Bravos, 67 Charlies. We're buying those. And the program of record for Kilo is 200. We're buying 200. So, and so, I would just point out that, like, we're fielding HIMARS and we're working on loitering munitions, and we're going to follow the Army down the path because we're not big enough to pay our own way. Gimlers, which is going to be a phenomenal capability. We got Navy, the Naval Strike Missile that's going to be followed up by the Maritime Strike Tomahawk. These are real capabilities, sir, that not only apply in Indo-Pacific. Look what we did with 61-2 and Major General Donovan in the High North, right in the wake of Ukraine. And so what I would tell you, the existential threat to the Marine Corps, between you and just from Karsten Heckle's point, is the lack of amphibious ships.
So you agree with my point with the Admiral?
Sir, I could not agree more. Sir, I've said this numerous times in multiple forums, CSIS and others. The threat to the concern for me and for the Marine Corps is not towed-tubed artillery or tanks. So we see what's happening to tanks in Ukraine. I'm not saying tanks have their place. Most grunts say they like them in an urban fight. Sir, I can pull up open source video of Ukrainians using a $200 quadcopter that's been modified to haul an 81 millimeter mortar, destroying a T-72.
Tanks are pretty relevant in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, sir.
Loitering munitions are not. What about? And sorry, Mr. Chairman, if we're waiting on others.
No, we had members that did second rounds already, so I'm just going to let you go.
Okay.
I've got some other things too, but I'm here till you're done. Then I got a few.
Well, again, and this
Go ahead.
requires a further debate. I mean, combat engineers, road clearing, bridging seems to be one of the most basic elements of Marine Corps ground capability that is gone.
Sir, I mean,
how do we cross a river when we do something in Taiwan or Iran or call the Army?
Well, sir, I mean, right now, the Commandant's focus was getting us, sir, look, multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. Sir, my opinion is, I don't know what your opinion is, that we had become a second land army. We walked away from the fleet. In 2010, we did not have a BLT to put against a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Everything got big. Nothing, we have, the ACV, a great vehicle, but it's built to the MRAP standards, right? It's completely survivable. Doesn't fit in the upper V on ships. It weighs 70,000 pounds. We're working around it, but these are issues. It takes 18 ACVs to do what 12 AAVs did. So we got big, heavy, immobile, and we're just trying to get back to being a fleet Marine Force again.
So let me ask one of the big criticisms, and maybe you can address it, and I already mentioned it, but and again, I know there's this notion that it's all the retired 4-stars, and it's not. It's not just the retired 4-stars. But this idea that force design, and again, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying these issues need to be aired. It's time for oversight on this whether you love force design or hate it. I love the Marine Corps, right? I mean, I love being a Marine more than I love being a U.S. Senator. So this is important to all Marines. And one of the criticisms is that force design appears to be building a niche force construct for only one situation in one location, and the whole concept of a combined arms force and readiness that needs amphibs has been diminished or will be diminished or is being diminished. So let me tee that one up for you, General. And I'm sure you've heard it, and I'm sure you want to disagree with it.
I completely and absolutely fundamentally disagree with the whole premise. It's still a MAGTAF. We're still a Marine Air Ground Task Force. We depending on the scenario, just like we did for 61-2, right after in the wake of Ukraine, we task organized and we put together a MAGTAF. And quite frankly, using where we found our value, sir, in the High North when this started, was the recon, counter-recon, sense and counter sense, and then make sense. We were passing off high-fidelity, target quality track data to our allies on what the adversary was doing with some assets that I can't talk about here. And so the direct application to everything the Commandant is what we've moved out on, not just the Commandant, what we've moved out on force design. And so remember, this is the fleet. These are the MAR-4s. These are all the MEFs. We meet, involved with this. So to think we're making this for a niche market, I just fundamentally disagree with. We've fielded HIMARS. We're going to continue. We're going to take that to the next level. And right now we're working on the loitering munitions to give us the full all-weather capability that's going to cover that 5-kilometer to 18-kilometer gap that we currently have with HIMARS But I just want to point out also, sir, that we didn't, we kept 7 batteries of 155. There's 3 east, 4 west, and we actually, as you know, an artillery battery at that point, traditionally had been 6 guns. We upped them to 8. And we're going to hold on to those for any kind of contingency.
Well, General, and thanks, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I went so long, but I think it's an important issue. Two final comments. One is in last year's NDAA, I had a provision, again, unanimous, that was requiring reporting from the Marine Corps on this very topic of what has been divested and what is the incoming combat capability. Those are due every 6 months. The first one is due in April, so in a couple days. I hope we get it on time. And then the other issue that I've been raising, which I believe the Marine Corps leadership agrees with, is that without full Navy support, force design fails. Because you're talking about integration, which is, I'm in agreement with you on that, General. But one of the things I mentioned in this Defense News op-ed from a while ago is presently I stated the Navy's enthusiasm for these innovative and likely dangerous Marine missions. The stand-in force is a dangerous mission. And the ability to get logistics and delivering Marines and sustainability in many ways is going to rely on the Marine Corps, but it's going to rely on the Navy. And as I mentioned there, the Navy's, this is a year ago, Navy's current strategy documents never mention once or highlight once Marine force design or concepts like stand-in forces or expeditionary operating base forces. So where's the Navy on that, Admiral? Because again, you'd be the biggest proponent of Marine Corps force design 2030 there is, but if the Navy is indifferent or doesn't care or wants to cut amphibs, then force design is going to fail.
There's no daylight between myself and Lieutenant General Heckel.
Have the Navy
medium landing ship
documents been updated to reflect interest in force design? Because last year's there was zero.
Yes, okay, sir. I mean, I acknowledge that, or I'll take a look at that, and I'll definitely provide that feedback.
Is what I'm saying.
So, in terms of Lieutenant General Heckel and I, we go on the road and we give briefs together. That talks to the stand-in force and the Commandant's design and how the Navy, as well as where the Navy's going in the future. We went up to MIT, very classified setting with over 300 industry partners, to give them a set of headlights in terms of how we're going to fight, so they understand the context and what do we need to fight with. And that's from the Marine Corps and the Navy perspective. The medium landing ship is going to be late to need. We acknowledge that. So we're committed to have a bridging strategy to get to that medium landing ship capability. That the ship will start construction in 25. We have to look for other alternatives. We are committed to that. We are a naval team. We are out in contact across the globe day in and day out for the various combatant commanders. We are a family. Is there friction at times? Certainly. But we're committed to the outcomes that we're both driving to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.